I do want to go to Ryan Reilly on this new reporting because he does have some of this new information, including a statement from Preet Bharara, who is representing Senator Adam Schiff. Ryan, bring us up to speed. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so there is an intense meeting between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the U.S. Attorney for Maryland over this case, Kristen, as we just posted our story on NBCNews.com. You know, this case has been going on for a while, and obviously, if you don't have the evidence, and from what legal experts have said, this would be a very tough case to bring. There's not a formal closure to the investigation yet, because based on what happened in Virginia in the Letitia James case, that's sort of the thing that's overhanging all of this, because in that instance, you had the U.S. attorney actually kicked out and replaced with one of Donald Trump's own attorneys, previous attorneys, who then prosecuted these cases, and she had never handled any prosecution before, had no prosecutorial experience. The first time that she stood in the courtroom, she actually went to the wrong table when they were returning these indictments against James Comey, as well as Attorney General James. So it's that's what's sort of hanging over all of this notion that Donald Trump could potentially go after the U.S. attorney in Maryland. But the U.S. attorney in Maryland did bring forward this other case against one of Donald Trump's other enemies, of course, but that case was considered to be a much stronger case. Experts agree over these other two cases out of Virginia, which are going to face a lot of hurdles. In fact, one legal expert told me that in terms of the vindictive prosecution motion that James Comey has made, if that doesn't succeed, then no vindictive prosecution argument will ever succeed, just because the president's comments put such a weight and really complicate that case, Kristen.
Well, and let me read you a bit of what Preet Bharara, who represents Senator Schiff, said in a statement. He says, quote, "It seems pretty clear that a team of career prosecutors have thoroughly reviewed the politically motivated allegations against Senator Schiff and found they are unsupported by any evidence and are baseless. The transparently vindictive effort to pursue the senator has no merit, and if there is any justice left in the Justice Department, this should be the end of the matter," Bharara added. But it's important to note, Ryan, it's not necessarily the end of the matter, right? These sources saying that this investigation is not closed.
That's right. Yeah. I think that the issue here is that whoever says, no, we're not moving forward with this investigation and makes the declination, that's a serious matter, and obviously Donald Trump isn't going to be too happy with that news. And just given that history, that's what's hanging over all of this. So, you know, this idea that, oh, we'll continue to investigate is something that you could argue is kind of something kicking the can down the road, and no one wants to be the person to say there's just no case here. Also, you're just going to struggle probably in Maryland, because remember, they struggled even to get past a majority on the grand jury, which is a much lower bar in the James Comey case. So when you're talking about a grand jury in Maryland, considering all of the grand juries in D.C. that have essentially nullified a lot of the prosecutions that have been brought forward that they found to be sort of overtly political and sort of sent a message about, that's a big possibility here. I think that if they were sitting in Maryland and they could come back and say, you know, we think that this case is obviously political, and just choose not to indict, even if they didn't necessarily, even if they thought that the evidence was somewhere. But they're not supposed to bring forward a case unless they think they can convict. That is what the Justice Manual says. So the notion that, you know, you actually think you could secure an indictment on the back end, or rather you could secure a conviction by a unanimous jury from Maryland on the back end of this, is, I think, kind of pie in the sky thinking there. And so that's kind of, I think, the big bar that's sort of looming over all of this. Yeah.
Yamiche, let me turn to you at the White House, as Ryan Reilly has that breaking news for us. Yamiche, we just heard President Trump's really strong language directed at Senator Schiff, one of his political rivals. And we should note that he is one of three names that appears on a what was a Truth Social post that a source told me was intended to be a private message sent to Attorney General Pam Bondi, essentially calling for the indictment of James Comey, calling for the indictment of Letitia James, and calling for the indictment of Senator Schiff. 2 of the 3 people on that list have been indicted. So put all of this into the political context, Yamiche. This is a president who campaigned on a promise of retribution. He later said that his success would be his retribution. But what we are seeing from the Justice Department has raised questions about whether there is some acting at the direction of President Trump. Yamiche.
That's right, Kristen. And I was looking down at my phone because, one, the president's still talking, but 2, I wanted to look at exactly what he said about Adam Schiff. And he said he's a very dishonest person, a sick person, a very bad person. Now, in this instance, he's talking about Senator Schiff, but you could take that language and add it to almost any one of the political foes that he's been pressuring very publicly the Department of Justice to go after, whether that's Letitia James, whether that's other people. You think of John Bolton, you think of Christopher Wray, a former FBI director who has not been indicted yet, but who soon after he indicted James Comey, he was also going after. So the president has a long list of people that he really wants to exert revenge over, and he's not making that at all sort of a hard thing to understand. In fact, he's making it very public. And even with that message where that was intended, based on your reporting and our reporting, that it was supposed to be a direct message to Pam Bondi, all you have to do is really listen to President Trump, and he goes off on so many different people. And he definitely feels like the Department of Justice is a sort of arm of his that he can use and wield against his political opponents. So I think it's very interesting to hear Pam Bondi say they don't want to talk about grand jury while you have and grand jury deliberations and what could be going on while you have the president so openly going after these different people. And we also have a story I think that came out just recently on NBCNews.com that showed that there are a lot of people who are very worried that they could face indictments. You think of people like Miles Taylor. He was the person that was going by that sort of anonymous name and wrote a book about President Trump and went after him. There are other people like Olivia Troy, who was also working in the first administration with President Trump and who has been a very public critic of the president. So there are just a number of people who are either already indicted or are very, very worried that they may be indicted, Kristen.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.